You're listening to Soneka on Wholehearted Men.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wholehearted Men Show with your host, Soneka. Every day in the news, we stand witness to examples of a world in which more and more men are showing up broken, misdirected, aggressive, violent, emotionally and mentally unstable. There's a visible lack of emotional intelligence evident in male culture that needs education and rehabilitation. We need to teach men how to love. On the Wholehearted Men Show, we explore how to help men live life with heart. The Wholehearted Men Show is sponsored by the Institute for Wholehearted Men, whose primary goal is to nurture the emotional and mental health of men so they can engage with the world wholeheartedly. Join us as we take this journey to change the hearts of men, one conversation at a time.
The Wholehearted Men Show. The Wholehearted Men Show. The Wholehearted Men Show.
Wajipha Chongwe is a mother, lover, intuitive shamanic artist, performer, storyteller, and genuine lover of humanity. She has written 2 art poetry books, exhibited on 3 continents representing her birth country always, and singing to many. Wajipha speaks openly about her recent cancer experience from an energetic and almost out-of-body perspective. To quote her, "Love is everything, and if all you can say is you have loved passionately and been loved passionately, then you have truly lived a life worth living." Join me as we talk with this wonderful woman about life, loss, love, happiness, and more on the Wholehearted Men Show. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wholehearted Men Show. And I have a treat for you this week. Interviewing somebody that I have known for over 40 years. She happens to be a sister. Of course, I don't have necessarily any biological sisters, but this one I grew up with from the time we were kids, and she still looks the same as she did when we were kids. I would recognize her in a crowded street somewhere. This is none other than Wajipha Chongwe, and my homegirl from Zambia, who, as I have been doing this series on ordinary people with extraordinary stories, we talk off and on, and I think she has some perspectives I think can be shared and need to be shared. Her own journey, through our own journey. One of the things that we have done together is we put together a song. I can take credit for the lyrics. I put together the lyrics, and she and her partner at the time, and I think in our band, put together the instrumentation, and she sang the song. And I'll be sharing little snippets of that at the end of the show, at the beginning of the show. I have to at the end of the show, I'll kind of play that and share the lyrics as well that we put together. And it was a tribute to a very good friend of ours, Pastor James, who also happened to be a special person in Wajipha's life back in the day. But we both missed him dearly, and we collaborated on that. So we have some depth to our relationship. I did a whole bunch of work with her mother once when I was younger. I was a model for her mother at a mother store, and did a lot of modeling for her mother. But this particular story is a little bit different. She gave me an idea when we were talking. It's about the different phases of love and really examining that journey. So, Wajipha, I'm going to start with the story that kind of made me go, we need to talk about this, which was you landing in Zambia a few years ago, I would say. And while you were in Zambia, discovering that you had cancer.
That was just exactly 12 months ago, actually.
Right. There you go. I said a few years ago. Look at that, 12 months ago. All right. So I want to start there because I think this is a story you need to tell, and I'll interject when you need clarification, but I think that you tell the story better than I do.
Okay. Thank you, Soneka, for having me on your show. And
my pleasure.
Yes, my brother. It's been many years, and
yes.
This is
You owe me
so
a hug,
good.
but I'll catch up
Yeah,
with you.
absolutely. And also, I just have to say about the song. Yes, I sang the song, but I have to give my husband Freddie Ponson credit for the whole
Yes.
music production and everything. Yeah, it
He's a
was
good
that
guy.
was a
He's a good guy.
yeah, and
Hopefully
that was a
you chime in at some point.
absolutely. Getting back to going to Zambia. So it was an honor for me to go back to Zambia last year because I had an exhibition, one of my first exhibitions, actually my first exhibition in Lusaka. And I was so looking forward to going there and being with my parents. I hadn't seen, I had previously been there the year before, just for a very short time. My father turned 80. And while I was there, I was approached by the gallery to see if I could do a show. So that's why, that was the major purpose of going to Zambia. To be honest, I hadn't been that well for a little bit of time. And it was getting serious before I left, but I guess we didn't realize how serious it was. And I was literally there. I arrived on the Tuesday, and by Monday, the following week, I was in hospital. I actually went to hospital Friday, ended up there on Monday, and then got admitted and had some very crazy procedure just to actually relieve me and also prevent my death. That's literally almost died. And then the day I got out, I actually got out the day before my exhibition.
So you were still able to make the exhibition?
I was able to make it. It was amazing. So at least, I'm there in hospital dying, and I'm saying to my surgeon, "Do you think I can be out by Friday? I've got an exhibition." And he looks at me. This is on Tuesday, and he says, "Oh, we'll see how we go." Yeah, but really, in terms of death, if I was going to die or if I had died, it would have been perfect for me. Of course, not for my family, but in terms of as an exit point, it would have been an okay exit point because I can honestly say that at that time, I would have been okay about moving, to the next stage. And for me, my belief is that we never die anyway. It's, a blink of an eye, and we're just in a different space. And it's not that far from the space that we're in now.
So I got to take you back to that because you just said, if I had died, I would have been okay. Okay. So what does that even mean?
Okay. What does that mean? Okay.
What does that even mean in the context of you're basically telling, I was hearing you say about, I arrived, I ended up in hospital, I was almost dying, and see, cancer is not a small word, so clearly you didn't know you had cancer.
No, I had no idea I had cancer. Right. I actually thought that I had some sort of stomach thing. But, the reality is a woman of my age, we always have hormonal problems. So it's really difficult to actually know what it was. And I thought it was just, going through the change. Right. But it was a lot more serious than that. But look, the thing is, Soneka, if you've lived the life that I've lived, and, we have had so many losses in our lives, and we grew up in the 80s. We grew up with the pandemic, or, when our brothers and our sisters and our cousins and our friends were dying of HIV and AIDS before antiretrovirals. So we know what loss is about. And I've always been curious about the notion of the afterlife. I was actually thinking about it today because I call myself an intuitive artist, a shamanic artist. So what is a shaman? And, you know, the thing is that it's a difficult one in our culture because of how spirituality has been demonized through to Christianity after colonization. So it's very difficult as an African when you're actually talking about spirituality in
our cultural sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But for me, I've always had that deep connection of there being something other than what we can see. So my relationship with spirit, with deceased, you know, with people who have passed has, it's, you know, it's kind of one in the same for me. So the fear of death, there is no fear. It's you know, and I do believe that sometimes, you know, in our lifetimes, there are exit points. And sometimes we, you know, on some level, we can actually leave or we can choose to stay. And for me, being in Zambia at that time was really the ending and the beginning of something else. So it could have ended, and it was okay had it ended, as the story of Wajipha at that time. But also what's so beautiful about it is that it was also a new beginning. So it really felt like a different, you know, I'm in a completely different phase, a different stage, and I have a better understanding of life from my perspective. You know, I mean, I just recently, Chilani took a photo of me, and I had some spirits that actually showed themselves in photographs, you know, and I thought that was, you know, that morning I was kind of saying to the spirit world, I said, come on, guys, the veil's dropping, so can we at least see you now? So be careful what you ask for. So normally it's just these subtle feelings. So yeah, I've probably spent most of my adult life in communication with the dead, which is probably not what we wanted to talk about.
No,
but
no.
it comes.
And you know, I've got people in here going, what exactly what exactly are they talking about? But I think in terms of perspective, it's very important for people to understand that one of the arguments I like to make is that we imported Western civilization, we imported Western religion, right? And we had stuff there before any of this came.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like in this country, nobody goes to Native Americans and tells them to abandon their culture. Yes, we have, you know, people trying to take Christianity and stuff everywhere out into the world. You know, I myself got saved in 98 and all that, but I have never been one of those who thinks that other people's cultures and other people's beliefs don't matter. You know, if I was born in India and I was a Hindu, you know, woe be it to somebody who would show up and tell me that everything I know is a lie. You know what I mean? Everything that I know and I understand is a lie. And I think that kind of applies to me in terms of our culture. You know, we come from a culture that has 72 different languages.
Absolutely.
And each one of those has its own enculturation things. And, you know, we can't abandon that because that's who we are. So I can understand exactly what you're talking about. And I know, you know, people don't know this about you, but you mentioned Chilani. So our audience may not know who Chilani is. So you definitely, when you mention names, please make connections.
Well, Chilani is my youngest daughter. And, you know, I think the thing is that for me, life has been, it's been a lonely journey, let's say. And maybe that's why I've been more open to what, you know, the things that are not obvious, and a little bit more sensitive to what is, you know, the things that are not so obviously happening, but are kind of behind the scenes, or really honing into feelings and feeling my way through. So when you talk about, you know, when I say that I'm a shamanic artist and I'm an intuitive artist, I basically draw what I feel, and these images, you know, these images which feel like family. I don't even see them before they're created, but they feel very warm to me. They feel it's something that I'm very much, it's like it's mutually exclusive, you know, I'm part of it, they're part of me. And I guess it's that kind of coexistence, you know. It makes it's made my life easier. You know, it's made me interpret things a lot differently or come from a different perspective. You know, I've had a lot of loss. I've had a lot of loss in relationships, in love, like we were talking about. We're going to talk about the different perspectives of love. So the song that we wrote, that was my first experience of true love. And, you know, I was 16 and a half when I met him. And by the time I was 21, he was dead. And, you know, half of that time we were together, then we weren't together, and then I was away, and then we saw each other. But there was always this bond that actually, you know, was stronger in his passing. And I've had a lot of communication, you know, from that side. So, yeah, I mean, you know, look, it is, for me, it just is, it is what it is. I don't have any issues with what anyone else believes. I mean, the problem for me in general is with organized religion, it's usually, you know, people usually put you know, they'll put something else down. I mean, my theory is, why can't we just do everything and just let everyone be happy? You know, my principle is universal law, which means you don't hurt anyone. You know, if you accidentally hurt someone, you apologize, or you do something, you know, you make sure that you correct what you've done,
right,
in some way.
One of my closest friends, and you know, you don't harm anyone. Listening to what you said, don't harm anyone. Correct if you do wrong somebody. Correct what you've done. One of my closest friends, who's brother, another Zambian guy that is here with me. He's a pastor, and we had a conversation once, and he said, you know what, he said exactly what you said. The fact that he doesn't believe in going to anybody else who believes something different and trying to spend his time convincing them about anything. He says, because they are people who believe other things, and they're the most peaceful and loving people that you know in the world. And he says, and that's really that universal thing that you're talking about.
Exactly.
That when a person shows themselves true, peaceful, real, and a depth of authenticity, that clearly they have a spirit connection, is what he was saying. And he says, and my role in that conversation is to simply share with you the peace that I've found with, you know what I'm saying, as he said, you know, in my Christianity. You know, he says, I'm not going to, and that's where I got this, I'm not going to go to a Hindu, I'm not going to go to a Muslim, I'm not going to, and start spouting and trying to argue something. Because if somebody shows up whole, that's what you need. You want a whole human being. But you said something in this conversation. You said lonely. You used the word lonely. So like we told you, I said, I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
Because you said lonely, and you said I've had a lonely existence. Now, you're going to have to explain what that means, because I know you're surrounded usually.
I know.
I was growing up, I'm kind of like, look, you know, we've always been in crowds. We've traveled in packs, basically. Yeah. So what does that even mean?
Okay, I think maybe isolated, you know, and I guess, you know, I turned 18 and I left home, and I didn't just leave the house, I left the country. You know, I went and worked in just in Denmark, just outside of Copenhagen for a year, and then I went to Australia, to Western Australia. Now, yeah, well, my mother's from Australia, but I mean, how far is Australia in comparison to Zambia? So I basically went a really long way away, the other side of the world, where you know, I had no friends. You know, so I literally started again, and you know, redefined myself, or got to find myself. And the thing with you know, I mean, luckily I was young, but, you know, the thing is that it was a completely different culture. Even though, you know, my mother is Australian and, you know, I used to go to Australia on holidays, but the culture was very different to the culture that we had in Lusaka. You know, and I'm not even talking about Zambian culture. Let's talk about the culture that we had as kids, you know, as youngsters. You know, we were doing music. You know, I was breakdancing. We were, you know, performing in nightclubs. We were going to really groovy nightclubs. And I got to Western Australia. I mean, there was no rap. You know, there was no hip hop. Like, seriously, there was nothing.
There's no rap, there was no hip hop.
So, you know, I mean, the closest thing I got to breakdancing was actually teaching aerobics. I taught aerobics. I worked in the fitness industry for about 10 years, and I taught hip hop classes to kids. That was like the closest. But, you know, any kind of, you know, anything that I did as a teenager was completely abandoned when I got to Western Australia, because, I mean, culturally it was so different. So I felt different, you know, and apart from the obvious thing and the racism that I encountered, and I guess, you know, I was quite naive to the racism, and it's only over the years that you actually look back and then you realize, oh, that's why I didn't get to do what I wanted, or that's what was going on. And okay. So, and I guess, you know, from these experiences, I also didn't make great choices. But, you know, the way from my perspective now, every choice is the right choice because it leads to an experience. And had I not gone through the experiences that I've been through, I wouldn't be who I am now. But it's, you know, it's tough because when we go back to being isolated, I really wanted the family, you know, like for me, there's something intrinsic in my soul that I don't know, maybe I bought into the ideal that the family is a certain way. And when I found out that my family of origin operated on different levels, that was quite a difficult pill to swallow, let's say. And so I kept on putting myself into situations where ordinarily I wouldn't, you know, you would just walk away. But because you're isolated anyway, and you're trying to look for this kind of relationship where you believe that there should be a close, you know, you have, because you have a biological bond, you're bound to be close. I really realized, you know, I learned the hard way that that's not the case, which means, of course, because of that, maybe it makes you appreciate what you have. And I had my kids in my 20s. And, you know, so I guess sometimes people say it was relatively young. I was 25 when I had my son. By the time I was 31, I'd had my third child. And then my husband left me when my kids were all under 10. And that was quite a concept that I hadn't entertained. You know, I wasn't, and I don't think people, you know, set out to become single parents of 3 children. But
I don't think anybody writes that down as like a goal,
a life goal. No, but and you know, of course, this is almost 20 years later, so you know I can kind of laugh about it. But it was extremely traumatic, you know, and so it was like death, except the relationships that I've had with the people that I have with the people that are dead are a lot better. You know, it's a divorce situation. when you still have to have contact with someone who's not a very easy person to deal with, makes life very difficult. But which comes, you know, I think which again in turn really put me on the journey of self-development.
Right.
You know, everything that's happened, I look at it, I've tried to look at it from different perspectives, but also from the heart perspective. And, I was, just learning how to be very clear. And, obviously things like boundaries were very, something that I clearly didn't have good boundaries. I think that to a certain degree, the lifestyle that we had in Lusaka, I don't know whether, I think that, like, even if we didn't, there was that kind of friendship thing that we had, that even if we didn't see each other, if we knew someone, you'd always look out for that person wherever you saw them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like when I talk to, I've met, when I've met as an adult, when I meet friends of mine that I went to school with, we always look back on that period when we were teenagers and think, my God, how did we manage to go to that place or do that? And we were all fine. We were all safe, or there's, or
Right.
were we just under the illusion that it was a safe place?
Is that a question for me?
I don't know, because like, I did find out that the outside world was so completely different. It was so devastatingly different. Or or was that just naive?
You said something early on in this, which I'm going to try to answer your question, because I think it does deserve an answer. But at the same time, you said something early on, which I think was very poignant. You talked about your picture of family, or your picture of family versus what your experience was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think
Mm-hmm.
you kind of need to clarify that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because in terms of the isolation, the loneliness, and everything that you said, and then
Mm-hmm.
you led into, being a young mother. They say children of your youth, which you had them at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't fault you for that. Like some of us who've got 8-year-olds and we're, so
yeah, but
I'll be the last
that's a
person.
gift. That's a gift.
Yeah,
You're
I
so
can't argue with
lucky.
that. Trust me, I can't argue with that gift thing. But
Yeah.
it truly is that, you had children in your youth, and the devastation of, like you said, getting divorced. And you actually said my husband left me, which if you want to clarify a little bit on that. But first, go back to that ideal of family, what you saw versus what your experience is. And then we'll come fast forward to this thing about whether you were naive and etc. in terms of, our culture and ending up in places and all that. So
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the thing with family is, I kind of thought that because, my father is actually an only child. So, and there were 10 children, and he was the surviving one out of the 10
That's
children.
new information for me. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then later on, my grandfather had 2 other children, but for my whole life, my father, it was just him. And then so we had cousins, as you do, but in our household, there were not a lot of people in our household. And my brother and cousin went to boarding school in Australia while I was growing up. So I felt like, I've always felt like I should have been part of a bigger family. I can't explain it, but it's always something that, it feels like there should be more of us. And, my mother only had 2 natural children, and then I have 2 adopted brothers. But it always felt that there should be more of us. So I guess when I went to Australia, I had more family there, and I thought that we would be close and that we would, do things together. And when I had my children, and they, they would have this big family. But of course, unfortunately, it wasn't like that. People, and the thing is that when you're dealing with people who have they have their own experiences, and they bring their own family stuff into the family of origin, and it affects every member. So what happened was, I you know, I was isolated from that. I was pushed out of that kind of environment that I thought I would be part of. And that was a notion or a fantasy that I held on to for a very long time. And a lot of people that I know would have just got the message, you know, after a couple of years. It took me about 16 years. You know, it's like, I'm here.
I wonder, is she hard-headed? I wonder.
Yeah, it's like knocking, hello, yeah, just kick me in the head. So, if, you know, I mean, and look, you know, and the thing is that what I do believe is the people that have caused you the greatest harm are your biggest teachers, you know, and when you look at forgiveness and when you start seeing things from different perspectives, and that's what I mean, is that I try to take situations and look at them from all perspectives, and I'm always looking for the blessing in something. And, you know, it's not necessarily what I had anticipated, but at least, you know, the blessing is that you know, there's a lot more that I understand.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, you know, maybe that's the sort of thing that we tell ourselves, you know, if you've been through, you know, I've been through narcissistic abuse, which is, or, you know, abuse that is emotional abuse, and that's very subtle. So it's not something that's very obvious. And when those things are not very obvious, it's very difficult for other people to understand. And with that kind of abuse, when it's subtle, it's also confusing for the victim themselves. And usually it's only after a long period of time, or once these behaviors have been established, that they actually realize that they've actually been participating in something. And, you know, and it's when you're dealing also with people who are very manipulative. And I think, you know, you can have families of origin where people are not used to that kind of behavior. So, you know, when the people that you would have thought could step in and say something, they were also not aware of it. But then it all escalates, and by the time it, you know, it erupts, the damage has been done. And so that's, for me, my life for many years has been very separate from. So, which, you know, I mean, I've always been close to my children, but it, you know, our bond is a lot tighter. But, you know, in the kind of grand scheme, I was hoping that things would be a lot different to the way they turned out.
Well, okay. I know for our listeners and our viewers, I know a little bit more about Wajipha's story. So, and we are definitely trying to keep this as PG as we can, right? Because I think there's a concept here about family. There's a concept here about trauma, recovering from trauma, and I think we're going to also be leading into back to where we started off from, which is the cancer, and just the conversation about how all of this that we're talking about kind of manifested itself, you say, at least in your articulation, which I think was very poignant and very real. So we're going to get to that. But I think it's very important to understand the backstory in terms of spiritual, physical, mental, to kind of land where we're going to be landing in a little bit. So back to what we've said, I haven't forgotten about naivety, or, you know, were we naive in terms of ending up? I think we were in a safe society. I think we operated in a safe society because I think our parents were the first generation of people who had received freedom after independence. So they were the first professionals who were building, you know, at our parents' ages. They were, and they themselves were young. You know, I've had these conversations with people who didn't realize how young our parents were when they were thrust into this role of leading nations. That's why, you know, you have like our first ambassador to the US being some young, you know, in his late 20s. I think it was when Vijay Wanga went to the UN, he was in 29 or something. Imagine that. I can't imagine anybody making me an ambassador at 29. I would lose my mind.
Absolutely.
You know, not to say he didn't, but
you know what? I'm not going to comment. Is that okay? I'm not going to go there.
I'm just, again, he wrote a book, so I'm going by his book.
Okay.
I read it too, An Extraordinary Life. So I think that when you look at that, you have to look at it in context, in that, you had these young people who were leading the nation. But what they did is provide us with a lot of these opportunities that were just incredible opportunities as kids to have. And we all knew each other, right? We were in an oikos where nothing could happen to you because if I was there, I mean, it was impossible that something crazy would happen. You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
we all knew, we were all looking out for each other, like you said, just by nature of the fact that I know you, I kind of know your parents, or your parents know my parents, and that's what we existed in. And I think that's what made it very unrealistic for us when we went outside, because we had this insulated mentality. And we took it for granted that community would follow us. And Western civilization doesn't work like that. Western civ, it's funny because that's why many of the Western civ people who ended up in our environment were so taken and refused to leave because of community. Because here you can have a relative like down the street and you never see them. Because we are so entrenched in trying to survive. You can't just, I can't just show up at your house, Wajipha, at lunchtime and expect to eat.
No.
In Western civilization, at home you could.
Exactly.
We had that kind of society where I would show up with my buddies at lunchtime, and my mother would just like, okay, I guess I got to feed all these kids.
Well, we didn't even have phones.
Yeah.
I mean, and there were phones in those days, but we didn't have them. We didn't even like. Right? Yeah. We didn't have cell phones.
If I disappeared from the house, my parents weren't worried that I wasn't going to show back up.
No.
It wasn't like, I'd go over to my friend's place as long as they knew, okay, it's like, Henry and I, if I disappeared and I was with Henry, it was like my parents assumed I slept at Henry's house. I didn't have to call home and say, same thing, it was just that cadence. So to answer what you said, I think, there was a level of us being naive. But I do say that I know that we were safe because we did grow up. The people we were unsafe from were the police, funny enough.
Yes.
We were unsafe from the police. Each other, we were fine. It was the cops you had to be afraid of because, you could get slapped for being found in the wrong place. I can't tell you the numbers of times I've been slapped by policemen, because as you know, I was all over the place. So, that was the story of my life. But anyway, let's get back. I wanted to make sure we touched upon what you said about being naive. But let's get back to this loneliness and this middle part here that seems very, very muddy. Right?
Okay.
It's clearly muddy. What was this? What do you feel this was raising in you? Because clearly you were divorced and you weren't in a place where you felt I'm going to use my word, cared for.
Look, absolutely. And the thing is that it's, now, I mean, it's funny because, like when you're out of something and it's been a while and then you go back, but you have a different perspective, so I have to try and think about what it was like when I was going through it. And all I can say is I was alone. I had been in a relationship for 12 years. I had 3 children, and pretty much overnight, my whole world changed. And not only did I have the loss of my husband leaving me, his family never spoke, like he had sisters, they never spoke to me after that. And members of my family were, basically became friends with him, and they had a friendship or a relationship exclusive to me. So I was on my own, and I was just trying to, at least try for the first, year, trying to build some sort of foundation for my children, because, I had just started working. My youngest daughter was 3, so, she wasn't even in school yet. And I had to really think about what I was going to do, because, when you're in a relationship, you give each other time. And, I had spent quite a lot of time supporting the development of his career. And of course, the idea is that, that you do that. And then, and I was the primary caretaker of the caregiver of the children. And then, once, the kids once the kids were a little bit older, then I could actually focus on what I was going to do. So, all of these things didn't happen. The time that I was going to spend on my own professional development, let's say, I didn't have that, and but the fact is that on an emotional level, I was on my own, and of course, I survived. I had.
Did you harbor any resentment for that?
No, because the thing is that in my heart, I always believe that, at least, from when my ex-husband left me, and I thought, if he's not happy, then, and if he wasn't happy, and if he felt that he had met his soulmate, then, I can be quoted saying to him, if you feel you've met your soulmate, I'm not going to stand in the way.
Wow.
I mean, I already had a soulmate love. And it's almost like when you have that experience, like, it's not, of course, my first husband and I were soulmates, but the relationship was different to the first relationship that I had. And so, yeah, I mean, did I harbor resentment? I think what happened is, over the years, because what became more evident was the emotional abuse that I was subjected to, and the games that were happening on a family of origin level, that became, that was really hard to deal with. And look, for a long time, I didn't understand it. I couldn't make sense of it. And, there was no defining moment. There was no real reason why things, for the marriage, that's a separate thing. But the whole kind of family drama that happened afterwards was just, it didn't make sense. And when you look at it realistically, it doesn't make sense. But so I really had to dig deep, and call in the ancestors. But there was an incident that happened after all of this, which was also a very upsetting event. And it was it was a catalyst for another trauma. And that trauma was the understanding that I really had no place in my family of origin. Like usually there's, you have your, there's a respectable place that you hold within your family of origin, but that was completely taken away. And everyone who participated in that, it was obvious. And I guess at that point, that's when, on a physical level, I thought that I must have instigated all of this.
You blamed yourself.
Yeah, that may work. But the thing is that, to be completely honest and realistic, there was nothing I could have ever done, because the part that I actually played, if it was someone else, they would have, it would have happened to them. It was, I was just the body in that situation.
Okay.
But I do, the thing that I do believe is that diseases like cancer are, they are the physical, there's usually an emotional response before it actually takes physical form. And when I was, when I was in hospital and the cancer that I had, they told me that I'd had it for 10 years.
Wow.
So, I was able to pinpoint exactly in terms of trauma, what trauma I had been through at that time. And this was, like a silent trauma. It's not something that I was talking about, because I was just trying to keep my head above water and, be there emotionally for my children without, succumbing to the madness of what was happening around.
Right. Like we say, posting the smiley pictures on Facebook. And the IG smiles, and the kids are doing stuff when, you're dying inside, right?
Well, I just think it's the sadness, that's what it is, because you learn how to, like you learn different coping mechanisms, and you create a better scenario for yourself.
Right.
But you're still, there's that sadness, and I think that's the important thing to take out of this, that it was a sad, intense sadness. I'm not sad, I'm not sad anymore. But and I didn't realize how, of course I knew how sad I was, but I didn't realize how much toll it took on my body. And I really do believe that that's why I was in the situation that I was in, last year. And, it was, the blessing in all of this was I actually got to spend some time with my parents, just some time without any interference from anyone else. And it was a really special time. I felt there was a lot of healing for us, which was nice. And, through that, I really do believe that, whatever happens will happen. But I don't have, like it was the ending of a long time of sadness for me.
Right. And I think to the listeners and watchers, Wajipha is sharing one of the things that we had talked about, which I'm glad you segued into, was how you made a connection. I think you said something to the effect that it was literally almost to the day, right? 10 years to the day, when this incident, like you said, where you got this clarity about the fact that I'm literally alone, in this, and I'm looking at myself like I'm the problem. To the day that you ended up discovering that you had this cancer, and I think you explained it so well when we talked about how you felt that it formed all this emotional stuff, and you used a nice word, which it's okay, by the way, we can use again, but basically I'll use the word crap, that emotional crap manifested itself into cancer. And for 10 years, like they said, it was just growing.
Slowly growing. And look, I think the thing is that, I'm not cancer free. It's I won't be given the cancer free card for a while. I don't know when that you get that card, but I do know that it's the heaviness. It's a strange thing. I didn't know that I had the cancer, but the emotional turmoil around the situation had gone, and it wasn't until the beginning of actually last year that I really was working at the concept of forgiveness, but from a heart perspective. And I was actually working with an amazing healer, an amazing Australian healer who's just so powerful. And what she was doing is she was actually she uses tones, tones from her voice. So it works on frequencies. So if you believe that we are energy and we respond to different sounds, for me, it was quite powerful because I was able to actually work in, really look at different emotions and look at different situations and work through a lot of childhood stuff, because apparently, well, obviously I didn't realize there was also a lot of childhood trauma that I was dealing with that I had not understood. And and that also explained to a certain degree possibly why I was kind of left on my own, and but I got to a place of forgiveness, and I was able to really, in terms of letting go, and and that happened a few months prior to the discovery of the tumor, or almost dying from my intestine was about to burst. So I really had I feel an energetic healing, or an energetic shift. I call it a timeline shift. So I think I could have had my double deaths. I would have died energetically and also physically, but I think that I actually I survived both.
You said something.
I don't know. Do I sound mad? Like I think sometimes.
What I think, if somebody's listening and you summarize a lot, I think it's always about stories. If when you're listening to people's stories, it's like if you pay close attention and you start summarizing the things, you begin to understand that holding on to pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, can literally lead into physical pain, because we are spirit. We're spirit in a physical body.
Absolutely.
And you experience life in all those areas, mind, body. It's like Christianity talks about the mind, body, right? Mind, body, and spirit. And that's the same in any kind of real realm where people are discussing existence, human existence. We are those three things, right?
Absolutely.
And if any one of those is sick, it affects the other two. So you can't have a messed up spirit and think that your mind is going to be okay and your body is going to be okay. You can't have a messed up body and think that your spirit is going to be okay, and you know what I'm saying? It's imbalanced. And not to say, when we say that messed up, meaning like, okay, maybe you've got a physical deformity. No, it's like when you're sick, and sick doesn't mean, oh, I'm ill. Sick can be anything. You know what I'm saying? Dis-ease, meaning there's disease and there's dis-ease.
Yeah, perfect.
And both of those can land you in the same pot. So I think you don't sound mad. You sound enlightened. And I think that's the real key in this. I think what got me, because I didn't know a whole bunch of this stuff, I think what got me was how you were able to pinpoint that I was in this place spiritually and mind-wise, and it manifested itself in this way. And like you said, I'm not cancer-free, but my heart and my mind are in a place of healing. So to me, that leads to saying the body will be healed too. You know what I mean? It's like it's inevitable, because whatever you believe, the body was built to heal itself. Literally, the body was built to heal itself. The body can heal itself.
It's remarkable
when put in a position where it should, and given everything it needs to heal itself. It'll heal itself. The body can heal itself from viruses.
Absolutely.
If under the right conditions.
Mm-hmm.
The body can heal itself. So I definitely hear you. So we are coming, we've got some time left. So I want to talk about where we are now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't say not quite cancer free. What does that mean?
Well, from the allopathic or Western perspective, the allopathic meaning the doctors.
Stop using big words, right?
Well, from the natural perspective and from an emotional perspective, I'm cancer free. I've been tested, I still have to get tested to make sure that nothing's in my blood or nothing's lurking around. But and I guess, whatever, bring it on, whatever the future holds. But I'm sure the story is different. It feels very different. Like physically, I feel much better. It's funny how, it's only when you are better that you realize that you've been sick for quite some time physically.
So any treatments? Are you undergoing any treatments except for the blood tests and all that kind of stuff? No, there's no treatments.
No, I'm not taking any treatments. I had 4 months of chemotherapy cycle and also chemotherapy tablets. So it was pretty intense. The regime is kudos to people who keep doing it and they do lots of cycles, because it's
we had a few weeks ago I had a friend who had both Sydney Kasanda. He's another Zambian guy, and he had both his legs amputated, and it all started from cancer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So both legs, he had one leg amputated, and that's actually the link I'm gonna send you so that you can listen to my conversation with him. Another extraordinary story. Another extraordinary. So my thing with you, Wajipha, is having known you literally like most of my life, is that I think in our talking there were things that you were sharing which I felt that people needed to hear, because people need to understand that emotional trauma is real. And we have to be careful. I met a guy who said to me about families of origin. I was having a family of origin. I've had family of origin issues myself, and I was at a men's gathering, and I remember it was the day we were leaving, and I was in there and I was complaining. I was like packing up my bunk, because we have these meetings at like these camps like Wise, and you can so it's like 100. It's like 100 men. It's the first time I experienced like love for men, because I came with that Zambian thing, which is like, don't touch me, don't come near me. Men together hugging and looking at each other's eyes. That's gay, right? That's kind of like the way we were raised. And once it was in 2013 when my therapist kind of suggested, I think you need to go to this thing, changed my life. And that's where this show came from, basically, over the years.
Beautiful.
But he said, you can refamily yourself. And that was a life-changing moment for me, because he said, sometimes you are not going to get the things you need from the people who you believe are biologically connected to you. And usually it's because they also suffer from the same trauma, so they don't know any better.
Absolutely.
They don't know any better. They are raising you the way they were raised. Or they are, if it's a sibling, younger or older. I mean, that's why therapy and these things are so great, because what happened was I began to get a perspective like, if you have experienced life like this, it's quite possible that the person you're with is reacting that way because they may have experienced worse if they're older than you. Or you might have been the one who, maybe you have a younger brother, younger sister, you might have manifested a lot of what you received on your younger brother, your younger sister. You know what I mean? It's like this cycle. And until somebody in the family breaks the cycle continues, because we just repeat what we are taught. That changed my life, because I was like, yeah, you know, I get to a place where I have to realize that I may never get what I need from you. A hug, you know, it's like, oh, my father never used to hug me. It's like, well, don't be the one not hugging your kids. That's how you change the cycle. You know what I mean? You change the cycle by hugging your kids, kissing your kids, telling your kids you love that. Change that part, because then your kids will go into their next iteration being like, oh my God, Mom used to shower us and Dad used to shower us with love. We didn't know what to do. I had to push him away after time when he was hugging me. You know, that's my mentality, because it's not that, you know, your parent didn't want to do it. It's just maybe they were never taught, because that's not how our traditional parents showed love.
Yes,
because they weren't loved like that. I mean, when if you were raised in a village somewhere in Zambezi, I mean, your father wasn't hugging you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, if you stubbed your toe, you weren't allowed to cry. You know,
right.
Boys don't cry. No one cries.
Right.
Yeah, you know, get on with it.
Right. But no, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your authenticity.
You're very welcome.
You know, I think it's just I really want to thank you for that. Your authenticity, your openness, and your truth. And I want you to understand that it is held with sacredness.
Thank you.
You know, what else do you want to share with us before we end?
Well, I did meet my soulmate.
Yes, thank you. Let's close with that. Tell me about that.
Yes, I did meet my soulmate 9 years ago, and you know that it's, if you say it was written in the stars, I knew 9 years before that I would meet him, and 6 months before I actually met him, I told our friend in spirit that, okay, I'm ready. Can you bring him now? Wow. So Mr. B-Man helped in there as well.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, there you go. Nice full circle, huh?
Nice full circle. For those of you that don't know B, we go back to our friend Buster, who we started off with, Buster James. I think it would be appropriate. Yeah, I think you kind of great segue into the fact that I'm actually going to play the song. And Buster James was an incredible human being. And he was young, like all of us. We knew him young, and he was a friend. And anybody who interacted with him, just I've always said that. It's like you just felt loved, you know.
He impacted on so many people's lives. You know, like his just was an amazing, outstanding young man.
Just good people. You know, it's like it was so. Even in retrospect, when I think about the good, hard times we had, the conversations, they always had a basis of warmth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when I remember my childhood days with him, or my young days with him, I remember him with love. Like he holds my heart, and he was worth a whole song. He was worth a whole bunch of lyrics. You know what I mean? Because I was always wondering when I heard the story, which I've never been satisfied with, by the way, and we'll leave that for another day. And it's because I knew him that the story of his death doesn't satisfy me in the way that it's been told.
It's a very difficult thing to comprehend, and you know, and you can't, you know, I mean, you can't comprehend what happened, and it's not so much, you know, what happened. It's just the life that was lost. Right. You know, that's the tragedy. You know, it was an absolute tragedy.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but he was special. He was special to so many people, you know, like and had a profound effect. I wonder if he knew how special he was to everyone.
Yeah, that's a good question. But between you and me, and because I have the opportunity because of my show to put it on record, I want you to know out there, wherever you are, that I knew Buster. Okay. And there's no way the Buster that I know, all right, would have done what you say he did. So I'm just letting you know that I'll never forget that. And I'm putting that out into the universe. Okay. So you know that you are always welcome here, and we definitely have way much more to talk about. We will keep in connection and get better. You know what I mean? Just continue to get better, continue to be radiant. You have that beautiful, beautiful smile that I've always loved, you know.
Thank you,
I've known,
Soneka.
you know, it's crazy when you've known somebody since you were kids, you know, like literally.
I know.
I'm still looking in the face of this girl I knew when I was a preteen.
At least we're still alive. You know?
That. Yes, amen to that.
People don't understand when we say we're survivors, you know, like we're repping for everyone else.
I'm telling you, repping the kingdom, because like when she said we were everywhere, man. That's nuts. But guess what? That's the story, right? That's the
story. Absolutely.
That's the
thank you for having me on your show, Soneka.
Thank you so much for coming. And
we didn't even talk about art. Next time.
Well, let's talk about it. We've got all her art in the background, but next time we will make this about those voices you keep hearing too, and how they're manifesting in those palettes behind you.
Well, they're showing their faces now, so I might have more exciting stuff to tell you next.
All right, love.
I might just talk about the person just standing to this side of you.
All right, you stay on. Don't go anywhere as we close the Wholehearted Men show. Okay.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, my sister.
Missing you today. Remembering all the words we didn't say. Memories are just memories, trying to find a way. Picture fading further away. Pain goes, somehow it won't let go. Becomes this thing I know for sure. My sorrow brings me back to you. Na 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 na. They say God takes his angels.
The Wholehearted Men Show.
The Wholehearted Men Show is a production of the Institute for Wholehearted Men at www.wholemen.org.